bring Jeffrey Tucker. He is on the show. He's the president of the Brownstone Institute. We're going to talk about this leaked Big Pharma memo detailing a plot to target Bobby Kennedy. Jeffrey, thanks for joining the show. This memo it's essentially minutes. My understanding is that it's minutes from a meeting. It allegedly shows the agenda of this group. It's a trade group, but it's basically a group of vaccine manufacturers that all get together to form strategies, I guess, to push their agenda in Washington, D.C. What do you make of this? You find this to be an authentic document?
I do. I suppose there's a chance that it's a fake, but I trust the person who sent it on to me, who was in direct contact with the leaker. He called him whistleblower, which I don't know if that's the right word, right? A leaker, I think, is the correct name. And as far as he could tell, it was authentic. You can judge for yourself. I put a lot of caveats at the top of the thing just to make sure.
We'll be saying allegedly a lot in this episode.
Yeah, I don't know
because Big Pharma is litigious.
I don't know how you authenticate something like this. I was trying to think through this, but anyway, as best we can tell. You can read it for yourself. It looks to me like reads just like minutes of a meeting, and the plot is more or less what we've seen unfold over the last 3 months. I recognize it in every detail. Mm-hmm. It seems totally authentic. You've got the motivation in place. You've got just classic lobbying by Big Pharma, which they're concerned about their industry, they're concerned about their profits, they're concerned about the viability of their markets, but not by being more open source, not by proving efficacy and safety, which is the main concern here. That's what's at issue, but they never address that.
No, they don't, which is actually the part that I found most interesting. So what it is, let's quickly go over what this is and what it contains. So the trade organization that I referenced is a group called Biotechnology Innovation Organization. Their acronym is BIO. The membership of this organization include vaccine manufacturers, drug manufacturers like Pfizer and Merck, Novavax, Vaxcyte, in addition to hundreds of others biotech firms. So again, this document is essentially a summary or the minutes readout of this April 3rd, 2025 meeting, allegedly, in which they are trying to figure out how to get Bobby Kennedy out of office. Now, that in and of itself is not terribly scandalous, except for the fact that they are not interested in the science that Bobby Kennedy is trying to reclaim in public health in our government. But one of the quotes in this document states what the agenda of the meeting is. And this is the quote: "It is time to go to the Hill and lobby that it is time for RFK Jr. to go." Now, here's what I will say. They're entitled to that opinion, and I think that they're wrong. I actually think it's an immoral opinion, but the truly problematic part of this to me is the methods of how they plan to get that done. So if you could talk to us about how they plan to lobby for that it's time for RFK to go, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. So there are conspiracy theories and there are conspiracies.
Yeah.
This is a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Several parts of this. One is to divide Maha and MAGA. So you just assert that RFK is operating at odds with the MAGA agenda. So you want to drive a wedge between those two things and find ways to do that, to turn the executive office of the White House against what RFK is doing. So that's part of it. And then another part is to divide the Maha alliance itself by making more diffuse and chaotic the coalition that supports RFK and is looking into the safety of these products. And one of the ways they're planning to do that is what I think we could call triangulation, is you reach out to conservative influencers, and they may name several institutions here where they think are vaccine friendly, along with several administration employees that they think are probably weak and sort of corruptible in some way. And they're dedicating...
Wait a second. Let's bring up what those names are, because I think people are going to be really interested. They name as some of their potential allies Dr. Oz, Senator Bill Cassidy. They mention Markari at the FDA. They mention his name as well. Before we even move on to the implications of that, do you feel that Dr. Oz, we can put Senator Cassidy aside for a second, do you feel that either Dr. Oz or Marty Markari are corruptible, or that they are vulnerable to being bought off by an organization like this?
I will tell you why they think that. It's because Macari, I guess, and Dr. Oz were both, I would say, like, weak on lockdowns. They were never really against the lockdowns. They didn't fly into the dissident community like the rest of us. They were pretty behind. And Dr. Oz in particular was a champion of the vax, and so was Marty. But that's not to say that I think these days they have the passion of converts. Actually, I don't think there's much difference at all between Dr. Oz, McCary, and RFK and Jay Bhattacharya. I think all these people are all on the same team. I feel really confident about that. Maybe not in the past, but here's the thing: they're trying to. This memo is very clever. They're trying to sort of drive a wedge between RFK and the agency's appointees that he's named. Based on their past positions, thinking that somebody like McCary or Dr. Oz are going to want to defend their past and therefore are sort of vulnerable to being swayed towards the direction of supporting the products that this trade industry is pushing. I think they're wrong in that evaluation. Actually, I actually know both these guys, and I don't really see that. I think they're interested in the truth more than anything else. The fact that it took too long for them to come around. I'm sorry about that, but that was then. This is now. They're working for RFK, and I don't think RFK has anything to worry about from either of them. That's my.
What about Senator Cassidy?
Cassidy is a serious problem, and the person that against whom anybody who believes in health freedom should be directing their ire, because it's very much supported by the pharmaceutical industry. That is a well-known fact. He's lobbied very hard for them. He's carried water for them. He's already sank one of the nominations to the CDC. Personally, he's in a position of great power, and extracted from RFK lots of promises to not make any changes in the childhood schedule, not to disturb the ACEP committee, all these things. He's got his hands in everything. And it's not for reasons of medicine or truth or health. It's all about his benefactors. We have every reason to believe that he will not be running again for another term, and is probably just looking for a golden parachute from one of the companies that signed on to this memo. So, yes, we have every reason to believe he is a thoroughly owned asset. I don't think anybody doubts that. I've never heard anybody dispute that. Nobody really thinks he's sincere. He's just an industry lobbyist. So yes, he's a very reliable tool. And again, he alone sank the nomination, one of the nominations for the CDC.
And Dr. Dave Weldon, we talked about him on this show.
Yeah.
Who had the audacity to question some things, which we're on YouTube Live right now, so we're not going to detail, but you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Back in the early 1990s. And he asked that, 35 years ago? Good Lord.
And also, Weldon wrote an article for Brownstone after that explaining his position on these topics and revealing things about which we did not know before. So he's a very compelling, serious scientist. He was a real deal. We're not talking about some ideologue here. He's a real deal. And so Cassidy just sunk him because, there he is. Cassidy just sunk him because he didn't think he could be trusted to defend industry interests in profitability and maintaining market share. So it's all pretty dark. Like Washington works the way you think it works in your worst cynical nightmares.
Totally. Like this makes the swamp. This really, I think, brings it home to roost when people think about the swamp. This is the swamp. It's not just these politicians like to schmooze with each other at cocktail hours and are lazy and like to take a lot of vacations. Like it's really nasty stuff. Really nasty stuff. And you mentioned too. Let me go back to something before we get past it, because I'm very curious about this. There are many reports. You are not the first person that I have heard talk about the promises that Senator Cassidy essentially coerced Bobby Kennedy into making, which Bobby Kennedy had to do, most likely because otherwise Senator Cassidy would not have voted to confirm him. He needed Senator Cassidy's vote in order to be confirmed. So he was, as Trump said, RFK Jr. at that moment did not hold the cards. He had to agree to some things, most likely, if he wanted Senator Cassidy's vote. Do we actually know for a fact what those promises that Bobby had to make to Senator Cassidy were?
Liz, we do know what the promises are. But whether and to what extent Cassidy has been able to enforce them is an entirely separate question. And to that, I would just say Cassidy does not have the power to force RFK to answer his phone calls or to meet with him or to comply with what he says and so on. It doesn't have that power.
What were those promises that RFK made to Senator Cassidy?
Like not to disturb the childhood schedule, for example.
And did RFK actually agree to that in the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't remember his exact wording. My guess is he said something like, I would not do and make any changes in the childhood schedule without evidence, right? He probably said something like that.
Right.
He's pretty good with his language. And on the ACIP committee, he probably said, I will never make any unwarranted changes in the ACIP committee, right? So these are the kind of things you say.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he was lying. He wasn't. But the point is that Cassidy.
No, I mean, it's politics. Yeah.
It's politics. And Cassidy is in no position to enforce anything. And RFK knows that, I mean, Cassidy cannot. I mean, he's a senator from, where is he from? From Louisiana or something like that. But he doesn't have the power to make decisions for the health and well-being of all children in America and all Americans. It's absurd. He just finds himself in this very powerful position, and is bought out by industry contributions.
Well, there are still Senator Cassidy. Unfortunately, he does have a bit of power though over RFK indirectly, because there are still Senate confirmations of other HHS related personnel that require Senator Cassidy's vote. And so, I mean, you can play power politics like that too, and say, hey, we're not gonna confirm, somebody else. I don't want to put ideas in his head if you don't do X, Y, and Z. But here's the thing. I do think it's really important to look at some of the language in this memo because there's basically Kennedy's actual policy proposals. And you guys at Brownstone Institute did a really good and thorough rundown of the implications of this memo. Highly recommend that everyone watching and sitting here with us today go and look at Brownstone's summary and the implications of this. But Kennedy's actual policy proposals is he wants to institute what he calls the Kennedy bar in public health, which means that there would be preclinical safety testing. You can't bring a new experimental product to market without first having safety information. He wants radical transparency. He wants the publication of raw data so that you and I can actually look at this stuff ourselves and we don't have to rely on deference to the experts. He wants a better type of long-term health tracking. So our VAERS system, we all know, is not actually representative of the harms that people suffer from medical products that they are coerced into taking. It is underrepresentative, and he wants restoration. This is what I asked him the last time I talked to him. He wants restoration of manufacturer liability. And I got to tell you, Jeffrey, that to me takes care of so many of the other problems. If you actually restore liability back to these medical product manufacturers, then they have to actually change the implications of their products, because otherwise they will be sued out of business.
That is really true. And that is something that I know he's working on. That and pharmaceutical advertising, right? All these things work together. But you're right, product liability just alone would make such a dramatic difference. We would see the entire landscape shift, and many of the thousands of companies that have signed up for this trade group might go into Chapter 11 in a matter of days.
I mean, which would speak to, then you wouldn't have to, look at someone and be like, they're anti, they're pro. It'd be like, well, the manufacturers themselves are the ones that are doing this. So here's the thing, though. In this memo, there is no discussion of Kennedy's policy proposals. There's no discussion of the Kennedy bar, which is essentially just bolstering the safety and the actual science surrounding a lot of these products and a lot of the approval, the regulatory approval for these products. Instead, and this is a sentence from Brownstone's summary, but I want to read it, or your analysis, I should say. I want to read it because I think that this is exactly correct. You write, Bio, that's the trade group that this memo allegedly was leaked from. Bio's fear is not scientific opposition. It's that Kennedy's regulatory scrutiny may render their current profit model obsolete. Yeah. And I think that actually encapsulates the entire memo in one sentence, because truly there were allegedly the CEOs of some of these vaccine manufacturers expressing concern because they're not getting investments, because investors aren't confident that they can just get rubber stamp approval on their products. Now they have to actually go through a real safety tested preclinical trial process before they're going to get approval. And so it's not a sure a surefire return on the investment like it has been for the past 30 years.
Yeah, and they lobbied for that indemnification from liability precisely because they didn't otherwise think they could face the market test. So all we're asking for is a capitalistic free market here, where people bear responsibility for the consequences of the products for the promises that they're making to people, that this is safe and effective. If it's not safe and effective, well, the industry bought the indemnification back in 1986 because they were not confident about their products, and we know this. So pulling that would be dramatic. That, and I mentioned pharmaceutical advertising too. But they're concerned about any disruption in this house of cards that they've created. So that's why they were very concerned about changing the ACIP.
And the shady part that I mentioned at the beginning too is when they're talking about how they want to communicate to the public and how they want to communicate to the lawmakers in Washington, D.C. that they're lobbying, they are recommending that lobbyists use our words against us. So, for example, think about Doge. It's embraced by President Trump supporters. It's embraced by MAGA. Everyone wants to Doge. We want efficiency in our federal government. We want transparency. We want to know all the bad things that the government has been weaponized against us, or all the ways the government has been weaponized against us. We want a secure border because we want safety in our streets. So taking those words, this memo actually encourages co-opting those words: safety, efficiency, health resilience, and transparency, to try to use them against lawmakers in Washington, D.C. in order to try to get Bobby out of office. Yes, that is so slimy.
And don't forget national security.
Right? Yeah, national security.
They mentioned that several times, that we need these products for reasons of national security. We know where that brought us last time.
Terrible.
Total lockdown of the global economy, not just the national economy. You weren't able to go to church. You didn't, for 2 holidays, Christian holidays, not for Easter, not for Christmas.
Terrible.
During 2020 and following, and then some places 2 years of school lockdowns and millions of businesses destroyed. And then they mandated we all walk around with masks. I mean, the whole thing is crazy and scary. But I think about this all the time, Liz. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is maybe the most powerful that's ever been assembled in the history of humanity. There's never been an industry that was able to totally shut down the world to wait for its product to come along. And when we didn't want that product, at least not enough of us wanted it, then they were able to lobby most governments in the world to segregate their cities by the vaccinated and unvaccinated, and then force their product into everybody's arms. Millions, even billions of people were forced to take medication they didn't want, and now many people are suffering, and they've got indemnification for the harms. So that kind of industry power is extraordinary. It's like unspeakable. This makes the East India Company seem like nothing, right? I mean,
it just shows you. To me, that makes this memo more frightening, because it shows you that, it's not like they have convincing arguments, right? It's not like they have truly convinced all of these governments all around the world, all of these industries, that they are correct morally or scientifically. No, they're using an incredible amount of money to pay off these people, to pay off entire governments. And so when I see a memo like this, it frightens me, because I know the extent of the war chest that Big Pharma has built up in order to enact their agenda on us. So my last question for you is, do you think, we're 3 months now from when this meeting allegedly took place. The date on this says April 3rd. We're now, July 2nd, July 3rd? I think it's July 2nd today. Has this been effective? Have they gotten any scalps according to this plot that they lay out?
Let me just say that Liz, that when this memo came out and I looked at it, and this was just yesterday morning, it's yesterday morning. This was 2 nights ago, I guess, when I first saw it. It seemed to explain a lot of things that were otherwise mysterious to me, that I've watched unfold over the last 3 months. Like surprising voices coming out, decrying RFK, trying to throw a monkey wrench into the gears, splitting MAGA and MAHA, strange alliances, surprising, weird things going on all the time. And this is my job as head of Brownstone. So I sort of on the front lines of this whole thing. There were so many strange things, but pretty much right after this meeting, things began to change. unusual voices began to pop up saying things I wouldn't have expected out of them and align themselves with, and people suddenly interested in this problem who otherwise had never spoken up for 5 years on these topics at all. So I knew there was some weird change in the matrix, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So
when I smelled the dollars and cents at work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this memo specifically said that they were allocating $2 million, which, I mean, in Washington terms, is not a lot of money. But if you're talking about sort of influencers that are kind of poor and looking for a leg up on things, $2 million can buy you a lot of influence, actually. So that's what they pledged to throw.
Plus, that's only the beginning. That's their first campaign just being tested out in one city. So yes, compared to how much money Big Pharma has, $2 million doesn't sound like a lot. But just for the first, let's test out this campaign that they are about to launch is called Why We Vaccinate. And they intend to, quote, use science and fear to try to manipulate people.
And fear. Yeah. So
every good scientific product that actually has real efficacy requires fear to sell it to the people.
You should be afraid. Well, so it's all a matter of creating chaos and making people confused and making people suspicious. You're like, oh, well, you can't trust this Dr. Oz guy. You can't trust this Marty McAree, and so on.
Yeah.
RFK is really just a limited hangout, or whatever the line of the day is.
Yeah.
He's not really MAGA. He's really, really bad news, and try to turn Trump against him. All these were plotted out in this memo. These are the things we can do to keep RFK's agenda of science and transparency, and Jay's too, and Dr. Oz, and so keep it from going through and to revert back to the status quo. And this is just the beginning. They have so many schemes. It's unbelievable. I watched the ACEP meeting the other day, and I was astounded at just the thickness of the bureaucracy and how they seemingly have everything sewn up. All I can say is if we're going to win this fight, it's going to take clarity, moral courage, determination, prudence, and really just kind of a relentless focus on the goal. And we might eventually get there, but I tell you what, there are so many barriers in the way. And if you doubt it, read the memo, see the plot, don't be manipulated, don't believe the lies, and stick to the agenda, which is just really about science and transparency. We are not going back to what we've lived through for the last 5 years, which they locked us down, destroyed our lives to make us accept their experimental product.
Terrible. And by the way, guys, if you want to read this memo, we're going to send it out in the Liz Wheeler newsletter. So if you're not already signed up for that, go to lizwheelernewsletter.com because you should read this for yourself. It's also, by the way, going to take a cadre of citizen journalists like you, scrutinizing everything that happens at HHS, everything that happens, in the office of Senator Cassidy, everything that happens related to these efforts to bring the Kennedy bar back to public health. Jeffrey Tucker, thank you so much for joining the show. I appreciate it. Guys, you can find him at the Brownstone Institute. We really appreciate being on the show today.
Liz, thank you so much for covering this. The New York Times, Washington Post have not touched you yet, but you're all over the story, and I appreciate it.
Well, unfortunately, I have to say I'm not surprised about that.